The last message I sent was simple. I need some time. No explanation. No drama. No goodbye. Just enough words to close the door without making noise. I didn't run away from my life. I slipped out of it. At the time, nothing looked broken from the outside. I had a job, people who knew my name, a routine that kept me moving forward. My days were full, my schedule was organized, my future looked stable. But inside, everything felt distant. Not painful. Not chaotic. Just empty. My life wasn't falling apart. It was fading. I had become someone who existed more than someone who lived. Conversations felt automatic. Smiles felt practiced. Even my thoughts felt repetitive, like I was stuck inside the same emotional loop. Wake up. Function. Repeat. No collapse. No explosion. Just quiet disappearance from my own experience. The idea of leaving didn't come from desperation. It came from curiosity. What would happen if I stopped showing up? Not dramatically. Not permanently. Just disappeared. No social media updates. No explanations. No emotional closure for anyone. Just absence. I told myself I needed space. But what I really needed was distance from the version of myself I had become. The night before I left, I packed lightly. No sentimental items. No photos. No reminders of who I used to be. Just clothes. Documents. And silence. I didn't feel sad. I felt calm. Calm in a way that feels like relief. Relief from expectations. Relief from roles. Relief from the identity everyone had attached to me. At the train station, no one waved goodbye. Because no one knew I was leaving. And that was the point. For the first time in years, my actions belonged only to me. The train doors closed quietly. No soundtrack. No symbolism. Just motion. As the city disappeared behind me, I felt something unfamiliar. Not freedom. Lightness. The lightness that comes when nothing is required of you anymore. No one needed me. No one expected me. No one even knew where I was. And for a moment, that felt like peace. I went somewhere anonymous. A place where my name meant nothing. Where my face blended into the background. I rented a small room. No decorations. No history. Just space. The first days felt strange. My body kept expecting responsibility. My mind kept preparing for conversations that never came. But slowly, the silence stopped feeling empty. It started feeling honest. Without my usual environment, I realized how much of my personality had been shaped by what others expected from me. The jokes I told. The way I spoke. The emotions I displayed. All of it had been adjusted. Filtered. Now, there was no audience. Just me. And I didn't know who I was without context. At first, I enjoyed the invisibility. I could walk through streets without being recognized. Sit in cafes without conversations. Exist without explanation. No one asked how I was doing. No one needed updates. And no one noticed my absence. That part surprised me. Not because I expected people to panic. But because I expected something. A message. A question. A sign that my disappearance mattered. But life moved on. Quietly. People replaced routines. Conversations continued. My space in the world was filled without resistance. I wasn't missed. I was forgotten. And that realization felt heavier than anything I had left behind. I had spent years being present in my life. But presence doesn't guarantee significance. Just because you show up doesn't mean you're seen. My disappearance wasn't dramatic enough to be noticed. It was just quiet enough to be ignored. I told myself that was freedom. But freedom doesn't feel this hollow. I began to understand something uncomfortable. I hadn't disappeared from my life. I had already disappeared from my relationships long before I left. Emotionally. Mentally. Internally. Physically leaving was just the final step. I wasn't escaping people. I was escaping the version of myself that felt invisible even when I was there. The silence around my absence mirrored the silence I had felt inside my life. No one chased me. Because no one felt my presence deeply enough to notice its absence. That truth hurt more than any argument ever could. I had become background noise in my own story. And now, I was just gone. Not mourned. Not questioned. Just replaced. The city I moved to didn't know my past. It didn't care about my reasons. It didn't ask for my story. It just allowed me to exist. And for the first time, I had no role to perform. No expectations to meet. No version of myself to maintain. But without those things, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Uncertainty. Not about the future. About who I was without my old life. I didn't know what my disappearance was supposed to fix. I just knew I couldn't stay. Because staying had made me feel invisible. And leaving was my last attempt to feel real. At first, being invisible felt like freedom. No expectations. No history. No one asking me to be anything. I could wake up whenever I wanted, walk through unfamiliar streets, sit in crowded places without being noticed. My name didn't matter. My past didn't matter. My story didn't matter. And for a while, that felt peaceful. But peace without connection doesn't stay peaceful for long. It turns into quiet. And quiet turns into emptiness. Days started blending together. Mornings felt the same as evenings. Without responsibilities, time lost its shape. Without people, my thoughts became louder. I had escaped my life. But I hadn't escaped myself. The version of me I ran from followed me into every silent moment. I realized something uncomfortable: my disappearance didn't make me feel more alive. It made me feel smaller. When no one knows you, no one reflects you. No one challenges you. No one reminds you who you are. Without that reflection, identity starts to fade. I wasn't becoming someone new. I was becoming no one. I started spending more time alone than I planned. Not because I was hiding, but because I didn't know how to reconnect. Conversations felt awkward. Eye contact felt unfamiliar. My voice sounded different to me, like it belonged to a stranger. I had left my old life behind. But I had also left my sense of self. At night, I lay in a room that didn't feel like mine, listening to sounds I didn't recognize. Cars passing. Voices outside. A city that didn't care whether I existed or not. And for the first time, I missed something. Not a person. Not a place. I missed being known. Being known means someone sees you beyond your surface. It means your presence creates a reaction. It means your absence creates a gap. My absence had created nothing. And that realization hurt more than any conflict ever had. I began thinking about the people I left behind. Not emotionally, realistically. How they had continued their lives. How my role had been replaced. How my presence had been optional. I wasn't angry at them. I was angry at myself. For staying silent for so long that my disappearance felt natural. I had been fading long before I left. The physical escape was just the final stage of emotional absence. The more time passed, the more I realized I hadn't disappeared to find myself. I disappeared because I didn't know who I was anymore. My identity had been built around routines, roles, and expectations. Without them, I felt empty. Directionless. Unanchored. Freedom without identity doesn't feel empowering. It feels disorienting. I tried to fill the silence with distractions. New places. New faces. New experiences. But everything felt shallow. Not because the world lacked depth. Because I wasn't connected to it. I had removed myself from the web of relationships that once gave my life meaning. Even imperfect relationships give structure to your existence. Without structure, I felt like I was floating without direction. Not lost. Unattached. And unattached doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like isolation. There were moments when I considered reaching out. Sending a message. Letting someone know I still existed. But then I asked myself, would it change anything? I hadn't left dramatically. I hadn't created emotional impact. I hadn't shown vulnerability. I had simply stopped participating. And people had adapted. Just like I had. I realized something painful: my disappearance wasn't shocking. It was consistent with how emotionally distant I had already become. Leaving didn't change how people saw me. It just confirmed it. That hurt. Because it meant my invisibility wasn't new. It was just more honest now. I started questioning what I was actually running from. It wasn't my job. It wasn't my routine. It wasn't even my relationships. It was the feeling of not being seen. And leaving didn't fix that. It just removed the possibility of being seen at all. I hadn't escaped invisibility. I had chosen it. The more I sat with that truth, the more I understood that my disappearance wasn't an act of freedom. It was an act of avoidance. Avoiding emotional exposure. Avoiding vulnerability. Avoiding the discomfort of asking to be understood. I had chosen silence instead. And silence doesn't heal. It just removes noise. Without noise, you finally hear your own thoughts. And my thoughts were asking a difficult question: what do you want to be remembered for? Not achievements. Not routines. Not reliability. Presence. Connection. Meaning. I realized I didn't want to be invisible. I wanted to be seen. But being seen requires showing up emotionally, not just physically. And that was something I had avoided for a long time. Leaving had shown me the cost of emotional absence. Not drama. Not tragedy. Just erasure. Quiet, unremarkable erasure. And now I was living inside it. The moment I understood the truth, it didn't feel like clarity. It felt like grief. Not the loud, dramatic kind. The quiet kind that settles in your chest and stays there. I hadn't disappeared to find myself. I had disappeared because I didn't know how to ask to be seen. For a long time, I believed that leaving my life behind would give me freedom. That anonymity would give me space to breathe. That silence would help me reconnect with who I was. But silence doesn't reconnect you. It isolates you. The more time passed, the more I realized that my absence wasn't healing me. It was shrinking me. Without relationships, without emotional exchange, without being reflected by others, my sense of self began to fade. Not dramatically. Gradually. I stopped having strong opinions. I stopped feeling deeply. I stopped caring about things that once mattered. Not because I was broken. Because nothing was asking me to be present anymore. Presence needs response. And no one was responding to me. There was a night when I walked through the city alone, watching people move in groups. Laughing, arguing, connecting, existing in each other's lives. I wasn't jealous. I felt invisible. Not ignored. Unregistered. Like my existence no longer created any emotional impact in the world. And that's when it finally hit me. I hadn't escaped my life. I had escaped responsibility for being emotionally present in it. I had left instead of asking to be understood. I had disappeared instead of asking to be valued. I had chosen silence instead of vulnerability. Because vulnerability is risky. It can be rejected. Misunderstood. Ignored. But at least it's real. My disappearance had been safe. And safety had made me irrelevant. I thought about the people I had left behind. Not with regret, but with awareness. I saw how easy it had been for them to adapt. How quickly my space had been filled. Not because I didn't matter. Because I hadn't shown myself enough to be missed. You can't be missed if you were never fully present. That was the hardest truth to accept. I had lived quietly for years. And now, I was gone quietly too. No one noticed because no one had felt me deeply. Not their fault. Mine. I had protected myself from emotional exposure for so long that my absence felt natural. And now, in a city that didn't know my name, I understood something important. Being unknown isn't freedom. Being unseen isn't peace. And disappearing doesn't give your life meaning. It removes it. I didn't want to stay invisible. Not because I needed attention. Because I needed connection. Connection gives shape to identity. Connection gives weight to presence. Connection gives meaning to existence. Without it, life feels like a hallway with no doors. Just movement. No direction. I realized I didn't need to go back to my old life. I needed to stop running from emotional presence. I needed to stop hiding inside silence. I started small. Not with announcements. Not with explanations. With honesty. I began talking to people again. Real conversations. Real emotions. No performance. No distance. I let myself be awkward. Uncertain. Human. And something changed. Not the world. Me. I felt heavier in a good way. Anchored. Like my existence was finally creating impact again. I wasn't invisible anymore. Not because people knew my past. Because they felt my presence. I learned something that reshaped how I understand life: you don't disappear in one moment. You fade when you stop showing up emotionally. And you don't reclaim yourself by running away. You reclaim yourself by being seen. Seen in your flaws. Seen in your uncertainty. Seen in your honesty. I didn't need to escape my life. I needed to participate in it. Fully. Because a life without emotional presence doesn't end in tragedy. It ends in silence. And silence doesn't hurt. It just erases. If you're listening to this and you feel invisible in your own life, I want you to know something. You don't need to disappear to be free. You need to be present to be real. Your voice matters. Your emotions matter. Your existence matters. But only if you allow it to be felt. I disappeared. And no one looked for me. Not because I didn't matter. Because I had already made myself invisible. Now, I choose to be seen. Not loudly. Not perfectly. But honestly. And honesty is the only way a life truly exists.